everybody, this is Dean with the Two Party Podcast. I'm on here and I'm gonna try to pronounce it again and do it right. It's Yehudit Silverman. And she's with us this morning, and she's just got a great story, a great career path, and just she really just has so much to share with you guys that I'm not sure we can do it all in one episode, but we're going to try to fit in what we can, and most importantly promote what she's doing in her life. So go ahead, Yehudi, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got to where you are, and maybe some of the journey you've been on that's got you where you are.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me.
For sure.
When I was growing up, I spent a lot of time hanging upside down from trees, reading books. I think I liked the idea of stories and also the perspective of being upside down. I went to a school where there were very few Jewish students, so I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism and the feeling of being the other, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners have experienced for different reasons. So being alone on the playground, I wanted to be different. I wanted straight hair and bangs. But I learned that in my imagination and my creativity, that was really healing. I also had a brother that was born with a heart condition, and this was before open heart surgery. So we were always aware if his lips were blue, he couldn't run. He often had headaches and difficulty breathing. So I learned that bad things happen to good people. But I also learned it matters how you respond. And my brother was the most enthusiastic person I know. He learned how to do the twist first, drop down, laughed at all my ridiculous jokes. Sadly, he died at 46 from a heart attack. But I feel like his life really taught me about living fully. And I also grew up with myth and fairy tale. My grandmother would read me fairy tales on the couch, and I listened to records of Greek myths. So this was a big part of my world. And then, as many teens, I was a really sullen, unhappy, rebellious teen, got into trouble, and then discovered dance. And I went to Sarah Lawrence College and took dance very seriously, learned discipline. And when I graduated, to make a living, I taught dance. And interestingly, one of my students asked me if I would work with her. She could only speak in a voice like this. She couldn't talk above this. And she had what's called selective mutism. For years, she had this condition, and doctors couldn't find out what it was, but she couldn't talk normally. So she asked me to work with her. I had no training as a therapist. I wasn't sure what she meant by work. I said, look, let's meet. I won't charge you. We'll just meet. So I brought in the idea of stories, and she chose the story of Snow White. And one day when she was in a container that was in the room that was representing the glass casket from the story, she banged on it and yelled in a normal voice, "Let me out!" When I told her afterwards, she didn't believe me. So next time I recorded her. So we worked together, and she slowly regained her voice. She felt I had cured her, but I knew the truth. It wasn't me, it was the story, and it was the creativity that really healed. So that started my journey, and I went back to school, studied dance therapy, drama therapy, somatic therapies, and then started working in hospitals and bringing that work to different clients. So I think that my experience of being the other, having a brother with a heart condition, and myths and fairy tales all sort of came together in this approach, the story within myth and fairy tale.
And the story within is also the book that you've written.
Yes, I recently published a book, and the book takes readers through a step-by-step creative arts therapies process of discovering your own story, the story that calls to you, and going through different creative mediums with that story. And the goal is really to uncover and access hidden and inaccessible aspects of ourselves.
And I think we all have that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're hard to get to, you know, like.
Yeah. We discussed, we had a guest on yesterday and we discussed a little bit, I guess every episode I have an opportunity using this platform to kind of, I guess it's therapy for me. So every time I have a guest or we discuss certain things, I have an opportunity to kind of discuss a little bit about my background and very dysfunctional background, grew up in a very dysfunctional, abusive home. My father was a murderer. And a drug dealer, and just lived a very horrific life. My mother fortunately got us away from that in the midst of being kidnapped, used as human shields in a police shootout while they tried to get custody of us from my father. There was just multiple really horrific things that went on. Luckily my mom was a strong woman and she got us away from it. She went back to school. She really just stood up and just took her role as a single mother very seriously. And she got us counseling and she got us help. So we were able to work through those things. And, exactly like you just said, the things that we bury and the things that are deep, while a lot of the counseling had helped me, obviously later in life, I went through paths that I, obviously shouldn't have done. It was my journey. It's what got me where I am now. But those same things that we thought, counseling would subside or counseling would help, they didn't. Because those things were still issues in me, and whether it came out in drinking or came out in my addiction, or just making poor choices, just not having that example of, whether it be the structured good family or just having worked through those things enough to really understand them and understand why they would affect me and how I can work about not letting them affect me. And what I love about what I'm hearing that you do is the creative. I've always been really good at art and drawing and sketching. I've never really taken it to a new level and really focused on it. But over the years, I've always had a sketchbook or drawings or journaling. And I've always considered myself pretty talented. I just never jumped on that artistic side of myself. But the creativity, I love that because I know there's so many therapists that work in that capacity. As far as like they'll bring somebody in or maybe a child that's kind of difficult to work with and they'll start off with art and they'll start off maybe with reading and then work their way into the talk therapy. And that's why I think the dynamic of what you do is quite amazing.
Well, first of all, I'm really moved by your story. Wow. Like it's almost mythic and the obstacle along the way. And yet you model of your mother.
Mm-hmm.
Who made this transformation like that.
Mm-hmm. She was very strong, very strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the creative arts are so healing because often what's inside of us can feel overwhelming. And when we create something, it becomes something that's outside of us, something we can look at, something we can work with. So it's less overwhelming, whether it's art, whether it's drama, whether it's music. And it's very life-giving. That's the thing about the arts, right? They're very life-giving and inspiring, and they tap into our own resilience.
Yeah, being able to take a thought or idea and make it tangible, make it real.
Exactly. And I think that there are so many layers in our psyche, and often what happens in therapy is that we can stay on one layer and circle around.
Yep.
The same stories, the same narrative of who we are. Those deeper layers that we can't even touch on that come out through the arts and also come out through using myth and fairy tale.
And so how many do you do regular sessions with people, or is have you just had an opportunity through the things you do to really work with people, or is this something you engage in your daily life?
I was very privileged to be able to work in hospitals. So I worked with very diverse populations, and it was amazing to be able to bring in this idea of creativity and stories. For example, I worked with a young girl suffering from anorexia, severely so. She was hooked up to a heart monitor,
Mm-hmm.
about 55 pounds, and she was about 14, 15. And she was really not compliant at all with eating. And I went in and I sat down on her bed and I felt something very squishy underneath me. And I sort of picked it up and realized, okay, this is her food that she was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So she began to deny it. And I just threw it away and said, tell me about stories that you like. So she told me about The Wizard of Oz. And we worked with The Wizard of Oz. And she chose the character of Dorothy. The tornado was her eating disorder. But basically, she thought it was very healing because it took her to Oz, which was this magical place of starvation. And I realized when in working with her that there was no way she was going to get help from the doctors who she really saw as evil witches
Right.
unless she would really embody this.
Mm-hmm.
So one day she embodied the tornado and she was spinning like on her bed, kind of moving around. And she did this maniacal laugh and then stopped and started crying. And I think that was the first time she realized that it was destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And then slowly but surely, it took a long time, but she got better. And I really feel like it was the story that allowed her to witness that, to see that this was destructive. People telling her that didn't matter. She was
Mm-hmm.
up to a heart monitor,
Yeah.
didn't matter, which is hard for us to believe. But so that was one of the ways in which I feel like the story within, I got to use it in hospitals.
It's really amazing, you know, and even her story, you know, in the place that she's at, like you said, she's on a heart monitor. She's got so many other things going on, and and really at the heart of it is this eating disorder, and you know, to break through to that in the middle of everything else going on, but yet it really taking a matter of her tying this in with you with a story in that creativity for her to be able to label things as they are, kind of how you explained it, you know, like the tornado is this part of it, the disaster of it, and for her to be able to link all those things up and then have a moment where she can break through.
Mm.
And you know, over the years, I think I've had a lot of breakthroughs, but it wasn't really up until I would say about 6 years ago that I really started taking a good look in the mirror, so to speak, and really just kind of reflecting on what I see in the mirror, what I like and dislike about myself, not what I dislike to the point where I want to get rid of it, but to the point where I have to recognize that that's who I am.
Mm.
And I have to love the person that's in the mirror, and even the flaws. I have to learn to love the things that I don't care about, whether it's be cosmetic or physical or and so that's about 6 years ago. I really started taking an emotional, spiritual, and physical journey. 2 years ago, more physical than ever. I was diagnosed many years ago, about 2010, 2009, with both my heart valves were failing.
Mm.
And at that point, I was also fighting for custody of my son. And so I was in the middle of a custody battle, and then looking at having to have open heart surgery, have both my valves replaced, which would have prevented me from having custody of my son, because I
Mm.
would have been laid up in a hospital for, you know, healing up for several months. And you know, I chose not to. I chose not to have open heart surgery. I chose that I put my son first, while a lot of people were like, you really should go get the surgery, and that way you can be here for your son, because if you don't make it through if your heart fails, you're not going to be here for your son. And I said, you know, I think it's more important right now that I fight for my son, and I fight to get custody of my son so that I can be a better father, and then we can work with the health issues together.
Mm.
And fortunately, he was young enough then that you know that wasn't a huge issue. Um, Fast forwarding many, you know, all the way up to 2014, 2015, I think is when my heart doctor finally cleared me. So and able to go back to work, changed my lifestyle, quit drinking, quit smoking, I was eating better. All these things that contributed to all of my tests that I had to do every 3 months, getting better every test. And to the point where I finally, you know, I keep nitroglycerin with me, but I don't have to have the heart surgery yet. I don't have to live on certain medications yet. I'm sure at some point, maybe in the future, I may have to have that or revisit that. But It was just important to me at that time that I was there for my son and got through this battle. And that was one of the hurdles for me that took me a minute, and also was part of a journey of just kind of self-discovery of learning to love myself. And through loving my son and fighting for custody of him, I learned kind of to love myself a little more. But you talk about the stories and the myths, and I look back at times where part of me getting through that moment was reading stories to my son. Part of that was literally laying in the bed with my 18-month-old son that I just got custody of, and just reading stories to him. And how that bond came about. And I didn't get to see him for 18 months. When he was born, his mother had used drugs. So when he was born, he was intubated. This is a woman that I never really dated. It was kind of, for lack of a better term, a one night stand type of mistake that I made that ended up making an amazing child out of the deal. And so the storytelling and stuff, and I still joke around with my son now. He's 12 years old, and I still joke around with him about certain stories. My mom, his grandmother, used to tell him the story about crying wolf and stuff, and that's still one of the things. He hasn't seen her in years, but it's still one of the stories that me and him will crack up about, because of the way she told it. Wasn't a traditional story. And so it's neat to have those connections in our minds that take us out of, sometimes that take us out of stress and take us out of reality, take us out of depression, which is a big topic we've spoke on lately. Tell me a little bit about the movie, and how it ties in with the book, how those correlate together, to kind of bring that all into one big perspective.
Well, I've actually made two films. The first film is called The Story Within: Myth and Fairy Tale in Therapy. And basically, you see 6 people going through the process and dealing with different aspects of their life through their chosen story and through the arts. One woman in the film has bipolar, and she's working with the effects of that through the film, and you see her processing and facing her challenges through the story. She chose the little match girl. And another woman was dealing, her parents survived the Holocaust. They were in Auschwitz, and they never talked about it. It was silent. She tells the story of Pandora's box. And on film, she actually opens the box for the first time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was extremely powerful. And I think the book and the film go together, because you read the book and it takes you through the different exercises, then you see them manifest.
Playing out.
Exactly.
That's truly amazing. What are some of obviously working with these people through the film, but also just some of the people you've worked with in your life, how does it change you? Because obviously there's always that, the doctor helping the patient thing, and the patient, goes about and lives happily ever after, we always hope. How has the people you've got to work with, or maybe the people that are in the movie that you talk about, how has that changed you? How has it impacted your life and helped you grow?
That's a great question. I think I just recently retired from being a professor in the Department of Creative Arts Therapies. And I taught The Story Within for 20 years. And I feel like every single year I learned from my students.
Yeah.
Different aspects about the process, something that they brought in that was missing, that needed to be there. So I feel like they constantly taught me. Also, my second film, which is called The Hidden Face of Suicide, that was a film that I made to work on issues around shame and stigma that still surround suicide. I worked with a Montreal group called Family Survivors of Suicide, and they talked about what it was like to be survivors, to be the ones left behind. We also worked with the idea of making masks. So they made masks that are a big part of the film. And we used masks because they said they felt like they had to hide behind a mask. That knew what it's like. So in terms of learning, I made the film because I felt like it was important to break the stigma. What I didn't anticipate was that the film is kind of screened around the world. It's actually traveled more places than I have. Um, but when I have gone with the screenings, people in the audience stand up and tell their stories for the first time.
That's cool.
And that I didn't anticipate. One woman at a screening stood up and said, I'm 65. My mother took her own life when I was 25. For 40 years, I've never talked about it. I was too ashamed.
That's crazy.
That just blew my mind. For 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
she felt she couldn't talk about it. And I had no idea that my film would give people permission to tell their own stories. So I feel like that was a big learning for me, that not only do we make a creation, but that it's the response to the creation that keeps it generative.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that relationship between the teller and the listener, between the film and the audience, that creates something brand new. So that was really a huge learning for me and very rewarding.
That I was going to say that sounds really rewarding, and as a whole, like you said, I mean, it just makes this whole picture and just creates this energy for all involved, for you, for them, for just an amazing opportunity to basically touch lives, and I've been on this big kick lately, and we kind of talked about it a little bit before we started recording. Is with the show. The past 2 weeks, I've been going on a lot of my social media platforms and doing lives and encouraging people to help others, and encourage what as easy as holding a door for someone, as easy as giving a compliment, a smile, a hug, going through a drive-through and just purchasing the meal behind you and just drive off, just doing things for people. You never know what somebody's going through. Somebody could be suicidal, somebody could be an abuser or the abused in a domestic situation, and at that moment you could meet them at a store, be in passing, hold a door for them, and give a smile or a compliment that could literally save their life or take them out of a moment that they're in, even for that split second. And so I've been encouraging that for the past 2 weeks. And what I find is through my journey of trying to teach myself, relearn, practicing kindness in that manner, and reinforcing it so that it becomes a second nature to me. So I don't have to think about seeing something and being kind. It just becomes something where I act. And so I'm working on myself to do that. And that's what I've been encouraging a lot of our audience to do. And what I find is that when I do that and I offer help to others, it helps me more than anything. It really, what I'm doing to help someone else, it saves my life. It saves my anxiety, my depression. It helps work me through the moments where I'm having a hard day. And I love that you speak on the isolation, the depression. These are all things that are big topics we've discussed. But you do workshops on suicide and trauma. And I bring that up because I just had a good friend and neighbor of mine, a gentleman that was 70 years old. His wife decided she was going to divorce him, leave him in the middle of the COVID stuff going on. And, we checked on him. We thought he was good. We thought everything was good. And about 3 months ago, his son, they couldn't get a hold of him, and his son come by to check on him. And I was on the back porch of my house, and I heard a yell, and my wife yelled for me that I needed to get over there and check on Pat. And I jumped the fence. I didn't even use the gate. I ran and I jumped the fence and I ran over there, and the front door was open and I could see his feet on the ground. And I have been through so much traumatic stuff in my life that my wife calls it a light switch. So she feels like, and I do, I know, I recognize it. I have a point where when something crazy and traumatic is going on due to my past and my post-traumatic and stuff, I can turn my emotions off. And I literally can do it to the point where I can get through the moment. I can get the ambulance, the police, I can get everything resolved. And then that light switch goes back on, and I can then assess and address my feelings. And that's what happened that day. I ran over there, and the son couldn't go in. He knew what would happen. He couldn't go in there. I walked in. I confirmed, of course, the guy shot himself. It was a gunshot wound to the head. He had been there a while, and so it was quite a mess. And I was able to confirm that. I was able to make sure there was no pulse. He had been there for a while. Came out, asked them to call the ambulance and the police, and we went from there. And then obviously that evening and days after, and here we are months after, and again, this was a good friend of mine. I love the guy. And I recognized that there was some of this I needed to work through, because I recognized these were, while the switch came back on, these emotions were there, and my wife was there to help me. And, obviously the police and several others had offered, there's counseling for this if you need it. And, I have been through so much, and I've been through the counseling that I decided it was a moment that I needed to really reflect at my age on how I used to handle things when I was younger, when I'd witnessed these type things, and how I was going to handle this situation with a good, close friend at this age. And so it was tough, and I had to work through it. So it really caught my attention when I saw that you do workshops and you discuss suicide and trauma. What does that look like? What do you do on your end to help maybe bring recognition to suicide? Like you said, a lot of people don't want to talk about these things. And I always encourage our audience, if they're struggling or they're feeling suicidal, speak up, talk to somebody, tell on yourself.
Yeah, first of all, I'm sorry about your friend, and I love how you started when you talked about just doing simple, kind things for other people.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I think
It's important. I feel, especially right now, it's important.
yes, and I also feel like right now with so much that's going on with the pandemic and climate and
Mm-hmm.
politics and all of it,
Yep.
we're all holding so much. So it's really important that we have avenues of connection. So I feel like that's part of what I'm doing right now is really through the book, through my newsletter, through webinars, free webinars. I've offered a lot of, I just did a conference actually hosted by Concordia with 9 panelists about story. We had 400 participants. And I feel like that this is allowing people to find avenues for themselves, to
Mm-hmm.
know how important it is for them to tell their stories,
Yep.
find avenues of creativity. And I think in terms of trauma, I think what's so important with trauma is to find a way, a safe way of working with it.
Yep.
And that's what's so difficult because we don't want to redo the trauma, right? We
Mm-hmm.
want to just go through the same experience again. So for me, I found that working creatively allows what's called an aesthetic distance. It allows a safety. So if you're working with a character and it gets too close and too scary, you just come back to this fictional world and
Mm-hmm.
have an amount of space. And then when you're ready, your own trauma comes up in a way that you can deal with it. And I
Right.
think that's so important with trauma because we really need to have it be gradual and to
Mm-hmm.
have it safe.
Yeah, and I would agree. And and there's a lot of traditional doctors and counseling. Like I said, I've been through counseling a lot in my life, and everybody for not to dismiss obviously medicine. It's amazing what we've done and come a long way, and not to dismiss counseling in general. But there's techniques that are used that are effective for individuals, and it's not effective for others. And I think that's exactly where your creative type of therapy is really ingenious, to be honest, because there are people that aren't good at voicing and verbalizing emotion or verbalizing what's gone on or how they feel. And traditional counseling, there's so much of a break. You got to get to know a patient. You've got to break down barriers and defenses and to get to that point. Whereas when you put yourself in a creative setting, you're so relaxed, you're so calm already. The defenses are already down because you're kind of just having fun. You're just kind of enjoying life. Whereas the creativeness as well as your emotions can come out so readily and so easily. And I can see that being just very helpful. I wish they had some of that when I was going through some of the stuff I was going through. Some of the coping mechanisms that I had back in the day was addiction and was alcohol. And I'm glad that I've overcome all of those problems, and I'm at a point now where my coping mechanisms are more based in reality, where I can genuinely look at a problem I'm facing, or if I'm having a bad day, I can look at it and understand it versus reaching for a drink or reaching for a drug or just go make a poor decision. And there's a lot of people, and I know in our audience, there's a lot of people that they still don't have those coping skills. And there's a lot of people that get those coping skills early and are very smart thinkers. And some people don't get that until they're later in life. Me, I'm a prime example. Here I'm 44 years old, and it took me up until about 6 years ago to really reflect on and start doing some self-help and working on myself, and recognizing that all the decisions that I had made that put me through hardship were bad coping decisions, the tools that I didn't have, or I had, but I wasn't using. And so it's very, with your type of therapy, it's very creative. Suicide and trauma has been a part of my life since my earliest memories. I mean, it's my earliest memories. I've lived through so many loss of friends, loss of families, whether it be drug overdoses, murders. I've lived through so many painful things. Which again is why that light switch is there. I know that's my defense. That's when things get rough, I can hit that switch and I'm good, I'm safe. But I never, for many years, never turned that switch back on. When I'd go through a traumatic event, I'd leave the switch for that event off, and I would never address the feelings, and I would never let down the defense, even for myself to look at it. And I think it's important that we do that. And I think it's important. I've been really encouraging the audience with every guest I've had on just recently. It's just so important to look at yourself and reflect on who you are, what you do, why you do it. The why is always, that's the key that's kind of helped me, is looking at the why. Why do I think this way? Why do I make this choice when I should be doing this thing? And those coping tools, if it's one person we can help that may not have those skills, that we can recognize, well, this person's struggling with this, what can we offer? And whether it's coping skills, or in your case, you're able to offer, to expand their creativity to help them work through a problem. And I think that's just amazing. And I think it's something I encourage the audience to do daily. And it's not always about, looking for the person that's in need. It's not always about looking for the person that's damaged. It's a matter of just helping everybody. You could be the happiest person on the planet, and I can still come over and make your day. And that's what I find right now in my life. That's the journey I'm on. Is it's important for me to try to encourage everybody I interact with in every way, no matter what state they're in. Kindness doesn't cost anything. It's one of those things where I wish everybody could get that it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to spend a penny to just be kind to somebody, give a compliment, give a smile, give a hug. Working through this pandemic, there's so much isolation. There's so much depression, higher suicide rates, a lot of just variables that are unknown. What would you give as advice for maybe someone in the audience that's going through that right now?
I think, first of all, it's really important to recognize that we are all going through something.
Mm-hmm.
I think often the idea of mask, I work a lot with masks because I feel like we feel we have to wear a mask, that we have to show that we're fine, and that we're tough. And we're not. Especially right now, everything's in upheaval, right? I think it's important to have people that you can share what's going on behind the mask with.
Yeah.
That share your vulnerability with.
Yeah. It's okay to be vulnerable. Yeah.
Exactly. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to admit that we're going through something. And I think the power of myth and fairy tale is that there's this idea of a quest. There's this idea that you're going through something, and there are challenges and obstacles, and that's part of the journey. And I think if we can frame what we're going through in that way, in kind of a mythic frame, that we're the protagonist, we're the hero, but it's tough and we have to go through some stuff, then it's different. Then it gives what we're going through meaning. Meaning making and a sense of purpose is really essential for being healthy and healing. So I feel like that finding ways of connecting right now, probably on Zoom, and creativity. It doesn't matter if you've never done any creativity, collage, but having someone see that part of you and validating it and witnessing someone else is extremely healing.
Yeah, and I encourage a lot of my friends and audience personally to always find there's a lot of people that just feel they're so alone and they don't realize they're surrounded with people, whether it's friends, family. With in my case, a lot of my family's passed away, a lot of my family's gone. I don't really have family, but my wife's side, she has family that's now my family. And then on top of that, I have friends that I've known for years. And I really encourage people to look for kind of how you said, the people in your kind of make your circle, have an accountability partner for times when you're lonely. There's people that suffer with depression and suicidal thoughts, and they need to have an accountability partner. They need to have someone that they can open up and be vulnerable with, that can tell, hey, I'm having a bad day. I'm really having terrible thoughts today. I just wanted to let you know I might need a little encouragement, or I might need you to stop by and check on me. And we need that. We're human beings. We're designed for companionship. We're designed for fellowship. We're designed to communicate and build on relationships. And I think one of the toughest things that for me was, and I've discussed this on several episodes, is relationships in general. Friends, I used to sabotage those things. It's important that we remember that our relationships are some of the most important things we have. And having accountability, having people we can be honest with, vulnerable with, we can tell our story to and won't be judged. Those are things that are so important in this world that we live in. There's so many, obviously, with crazy elections and nonsense politics and the media just stirring up everything they can stir up, that really isn't healthy. It's just not productive. No matter what your viewpoint is, there's better ways to interact as human beings and build on relationships and be stronger. And I think that should always supersede whatever our political views or our media views may be. It should always be the human nature. And that's how I've always kind of thought of things, and more now. Tell us a little bit about where we can get, first off, where we can get the book. Tell us some of the areas where we can find you, maybe on social media, different online platforms. Tell the audience where we can find all that about you.
Probably the main place is my website,
Okay.
which is www.yehuditsilverman.com. There's also a story within Facebook group, and there's a closed story within Facebook group for people that are going through the process. There's now groups all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Formed themselves going through the book, and in a way I think that can help with what you were talking about with the isolation and creativity, and it provides a structure.
Mm-hmm.
People to support each other through that process. I'm also on Instagram, and I guess that's it. And in terms of where to get the book, it's on Amazon. It's on different bookstores have it, and
Excellent.
all that is available on my website.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and check. I'm a big reader. My son is a huge reader. At 12 years old, the kid reads more books than anyone I've ever seen. My wife has a library. She's a reader. I'm going to look into getting the book myself because, again, this is part of my journey. This is part of the things I enjoy looking into. And you present and you bring to the table something as far as therapy. You bring something that I haven't seen or haven't done. And, the more knowledge I can get, or the more, I guess, outlets that I can look at that continue to help me on my journey to be a better father, better husband, better friend. I always welcome it. And so I'm going to go ahead and check your book out and see if I can't get it as well, and take a look at it for sure. So on that note, I want to have you on a future episode where we can maybe dig a little deeper on the structure of the format of the book, and maybe even once I get to take a look at it and we can get you on in the future, maybe even have an episode where we can maybe you can help walk me through a few steps of it, and we can kind of work the process maybe in an episode where we can share with the audience what it looks like to start that journey through the book.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, and it's just something a little different. If you haven't tried it before, it would be new to me and new to you too.
That's true.
There we go.
Things. And I think your show is great. I think it's great that you're raising awareness.
If I wasn't able to use this platform for what I'm doing and encouraging the audience the way I am and bringing guests on like you that can actually touch someone's lives out there, I don't think I would be doing this. I think if I wasn't able to use this platform for good, I don't see a reason to have kind of a nonsensical show. I really feel that I have a lot to give in my story and my testimony of life. And I feel that giving a platform to people like you and a guest that can present things that also help through their story or their career, I feel like that's what I need to be doing. And that's kind of why I started Two Party Podcast. I felt that there was a need for this. While there's tons of self-help and there's tons of all kinds of stuff you can look up online, and there's podcasts as well, I don't see a lot that are unfiltered where it's just a person and two people having a communication like we don't have anymore. In this day and age, everyone's on their phone or text or email. And I felt there was a need to have a platform and a podcast show that not just was genuine conversation, but on every topic. And anything can be discussed. But at the base of what I want to do is really present a platform where we're able to help and influence the audience, not just give the audience information and resource, but actually try to help somebody out there. And that's what I really enjoy doing about this.
I think that I feel the same way. I feel like I wouldn't have written the book
Yes.
if I feel like it could be of help or make the film, because why do it?
Exactly. And I've always heard, and I always hear about, what is the legacy you leave behind? And to me, I've taken that and I've condensed it down to, I'm not looking at my overall life, because probably the legacy of my life and my story isn't exactly something everybody wants to look at and call it an example. However, it's been my journey that's made me who I am. But now I've condensed it down to, what is my legacy today? What is my legacy in this interview? What is my legacy for the audience that I can bring out and you can bring out? So I, instead of looking at the legacy of my entire life in the big picture, I now look at my legacy in the moment, and the legacy of a conversation with one person each day, or just everything I do is a legacy that I work on. Instead of dismissing the moments that we have in life, because life is so short, I try to find where I can be impactful in the moment, whether it's the second I speak with someone, the minute I speak with someone, or if it's 10 minutes I speak with someone. How am I being impactful? How am I helping? If I want to sit around and joke and have comedy and fun with somebody, that's, we can do that. We can socialize. But I like to nowadays kind of engage and really be genuine in my interactions with people, so that I know that the moment I leave that conversation or I leave that person, I'm hoping to present something better and leave them in a better place when I walk away. Versus in my past, that wasn't the case. I was more opt to do damage in relationships or sabotage relationships. So that's where I really do enjoy this. And I hope in the future it helps one person. If one person gains some insight from the podcast, that's my goal.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's just something I'm real passionate about. So again, I'd love to get you booked in the future and maybe do like we discussed, maybe kind of walk through some of the book and walk through some of the process you use. I'd love to do that. I think that would be a great thing to do, and really help somebody out there understand, or somebody that may buy the book and really want to see it in action. Maybe we can kind of help on that. So I look forward to doing that.
I do too.
You have a great day.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Yep. Have a great one. Thank you.